crowd, we are so very, very thankful for your presence. To those that are visiting with us, it's such a real treat to have you. We appreciate you choosing to be with us today and pray that you'll be blessed by the time that you can spend with us as we study together from the Word of God. This morning we're going to focus the bulk of our attention to a story that Jesus gives to us over in Luke chapter 10. It's a bit from the things that are said in this particular passage. We're going to be talking about what I've phrased the Silent Samaritan. There was the one who helped this individual who was robbed and beaten up and left alongside the road. As Jesus tells the story here in Luke chapter 10 and beginning in verse 29, we find that Jesus here is talking in answer to a question that he'd received. There had been an effort by a lawyer to entrap him, and Jesus had given him a very thorough answer that the lawyer should have known himself, and probably did, but he was hoping to get Jesus to say something that would somehow alienate him from some in his crowd. And the answer that Jesus gave was the idea of treating your neighbor as you should. And this lawyer was trying to come up with a way to justify himself. It says here in verse 27, he answering said, "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy strength, and with all thy mind, and thy neighbor as thyself." And he said unto him, "Thou hast answered right. Do this, and thou shalt live." But he, willing to justify himself, the lawyer here, said unto Jesus, "Well, who is my neighbor?" Well, Jesus then crafts the answer to this by telling another story. In verse 30, Jesus answering said, "A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among thieves, which stripped him of his raiment, and wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. And by chance there came down a certain priest that way, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. And likewise a Levite, when he was at the place, came and looked on him, and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion on him. And he went to him and bound up his wounds, and pouring in oil and wine, and set him on his own beast, and brought him to an inn, and took care of him. And on the morrow, when he departed, he took out 2 pence, and gave to the host, and said unto him, Take care of him, and whatsoever thou spendest more, when I come again, I will repay thee. Now which of these 3 thinkest thou was neighbor unto him that fell among thieves? And he said, Well, he that showed mercy on him. And then said Jesus unto him, Go thou and do likewise. Whenever we look at the story given to us here by Jesus, we find that there was a Jewish individual on the road from Jerusalem to Jericho who was attacked by thieves and robbed. And there were 2 who came by and looked at the situation. Both of them were religious individuals. One of them, as he says here, was a certain priest who would have been leading in the worship services at the temple, I would suppose, when his rotation came up. Then there was a Levite who was a teacher of the law in the various communities around over Israel. But this Levite, who would have known the law, saw the man and just kept on walking. And it was a Samaritan, one who was often looked down upon. The Samaritans were held in great contempt by the Jews because they had a mixed ancestry, and so they looked at them kind of as half-breeds and not worthy of their considerations, and often had some very derogatory things to say about them, treating them like dogs. And it was this Samaritan who saw here a man injured. He didn't ask him a whole lot of questions, it doesn't say. He just pitched in to help. looking at this Samaritan, we can kind of analyze a little bit his thought process by looking at some of the things that we might ask, or maybe some of the thoughts that even went through the mind of the priest and the Levite as they chose not to help. You see, a lot of times we just talk too much. We can take what needs to be done, and we talk it, and we talk it, and we talk it, and we talk it, and it just never gets tended to. Remember a congregation one time, little group out in the country, and there's a lot of merit to what Paul told Titus when he said a congregation that doesn't have elders is lacking. I've worked in some of those situations, and trying to get things done through the proverbial business meeting can be an absolute nightmare. With this little congregation, with the way their building was situated, there was a sharp drop-off right at the edge of their parking lot. It was a pretty steep embankment, and if someone would have driven over that, it could have been pretty catastrophic. And so they had a fence, a wooden fence, out there by the edge of the parking lot. Well, over time, the fence began to be in disrepair, and the main thing was fixing a couple of boards and painting the thing, and it would have made a big difference and a great increase in security. They talked about that fence in every monthly business meeting for 3 years. Eventually, the fence rotted down, and so they just lived with it. But they talked it to death. It came up every month, and it was something else we needed to attend to. But it just never got done. And there were a lot of things that could have gone through the mind of the priest, the Levite, or the Samaritan. It's not recorded for us, but it's pretty common practice. And I think if we look at some of the silence that is here, maybe there are some pretty poignant lessons that we can learn. Whenever this Samaritan came upon this injured fellow, think of the mental conversation that he could have had with himself. What are you doing here all by yourself? Why did you try to come down this road, a road that was, history tells us, notorious for those who would rob and steal and mistreat others? Why would you be coming down this road by yourself? Now, the Samaritan, for whatever reason, he may have had others with him. We don't know that. Or maybe he realized that he knew enough about this road, what to look out for, and how to better take care of himself. But here's a man who obviously fell prey to some pretty vicious people. Even Solomon shared some wisdom back in Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 9 and 10. He said 2 are better than 1, because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, the one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him that is alone when he falleth, for he has not another to help him up. And that's exactly the condition with this fellow. And it would have been easy, and maybe this was the thought of the priest and the Levite. Well, you got what you deserve. You shouldn't have been traveling by yourself. You obviously were not paying attention, and now look at you. There's no evidence of that kind of impeding the Samaritan at all. He jumped in to help. But it was a question, nonetheless, that could have run through his head. They also, all 3 of them looked at this man in his situation and said, look what a mess you got yourself into. Somehow or other, you brought this on yourself. You should have been more watchful. There's a whole lot of fault here. What were you, some way or another, bringing attention to yourself? Were you trying to kind of flirting with danger here? And maybe that's why, out of all the travelers up and down this road, you were the one that the thieves decided to pounce on? We can make judgments like that. Individuals can be struggling with whatever the problem may be. And we're too busy trying to figure, well, why'd you get yourself in that kind of a mess? You should have known better. And we can kind of get on the judgment end of things and talk about it. And the person who's suffering is still laying there in the road. Jesus said over in Matthew chapter 7 and verse 1, "Judge not, that you be not judged." There's a whole lot of details you may not be aware of. There may be a whole other side of the story that you're not aware of. There may have been a whole lot of things that transpired that you don't know anything about. And so to be so quick to say, well, this is probably what happened, and I know that there was fault here, and this is what happened, and this is how it's supposed to work out. We write the whole narrative ourselves. And maybe 2/3 of it is totally wrong. But we talk it, and that's what's going through our head. And that's why sometimes we use that to excuse ourselves, so I can walk down the other side of the road with a clear conscience. I can go down the other side of the road and leave the person in their struggling trauma because I found a way to rationalize it myself, because I wrote the whole story. And it may not have a grain of truth to it in what I put together in my mind, as opposed to what the score really was. So Jesus says, "Judge not, that you be not judged." Would you want someone to make all those suppositions about you? And to have all those conclusions drawn about you that were erroneous and wrong? I don't think so. So here's a word of caution to us, taught to us by the silence of this Samaritan. He just went ahead and did what needed to be done. Also, as far as that priest and the Levite were concerned, as they came down the road, they had places to go and things to do. I haven't got time to mess with you. I haven't got time to stop from my busy schedule. I have places to go. I have things to do. I have expectations I've got to meet. And to the priest and the Levite, they may have said, you know what? If I actually touch that man, I might be considered unclean. And if I'm unclean, then that means I'm not going to be able to go to a certain social function that I have planned for this evening. Or it might mean that I've got to go through a whole lot of other ritual to be cleansed again. It's just going to mess up my whole day if I've got to help this guy. And so I just haven't got the time. I hope maybe good things happen for him, but I just can't be the one to get involved. I can't do anything to help out. I just don't have the time. I think about the words of the Apostle Paul. In Galatians chapter 6 and verse 2, he said, "Bear you one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ." He said you need help. You need to do what you can to be of support and to be of assistance to others. And yes, it may inconvenience you a little bit. It may make you miss watching the ball game. It may cause you to have to change your schedule. It may put you out some way or another. But the good that you can do for somebody else is going to be greatly appreciated by them. And kind of figures into what Jesus said over the Sermon on the Mount, when he said that we need to be laying up for ourselves treasures in heaven. And whenever we are to be known for our good works, maybe there's a chance we're missing here. If we put ourselves and our schedules ahead of everybody else. Sometimes you can. Sometimes there are prohibitions that just won't let you do what you would really like to do. But that's more the exception than the rule. For we are to be prone to be a peculiar people that are zealous of good works. And we're looking for the chances to what we can do. This Samaritan didn't sit there, it would seem at all from what's said, and mutter to himself as he put the wine and help doctor the guy's wounds and had to get him up on his animal to get him to the inn, and all that he was griping every step of the way. That doesn't seem to be evidenced at all in the story here that Jesus is telling. And then of course we can go the other way. Well, man, weren't you armed? You should have been able to have fought this off. You should have been prepared for this. You know this is dangerous territory. You got to be ready to take care of business, and you've got to handle all of these things that might come your way. And we're just not always going to be able to be as sharp on that as we would like to be. There's always going to be extenuating circumstances that can set up in front of us that can make life a little different. On that occasion, whenever they apprehended Jesus when he was in the garden, over in Matthew chapter 26 and going down to about verse 51, one of the apostles drew out a sword and was going to protect the Lord. And so one of them, verse 51 of Matthew 26, behold, one of them which were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest and smote off his ear. And then said Jesus unto him, put up again thy sword into his place, for all they that take the sword shall perish by the sword. And so this isn't the time and place for that. That kind of a judgment as to whether you should, whether you shouldn't, what should have been done, once again, you get off into those talking points that we can talk and rationalize and discuss and go on infinitum about all of this, and the guy's still laying in the road. Nobody is giving him help. No one is doing the things that could help him in his trauma. And we find as well with this Samaritan, he sees the case and he pitches in to do something for this distressed individual. And there's no evidence there at all that he was, well, aren't there some soldiers around? Everyone knows that this is a dangerous road, and there should be soldiers here. And there should be other, in our dispensation of time, we'd say there should be, where's the first responders? And where's the other folks that are supposed to be taking care of this mess? I shouldn't have to do it. That is all their job, and they, and we could just go on a tirade about the way things ought to be and how it should be done and who else's job it really was. And as for the priest and the Levites, just keep on walking, talking about it and shame. There should have been helpers here. There should have been people to keep this from happening. There should have been other folks to take responsibility for this because I don't want to. But that's not at all implied by this Samaritan. Or, of course, then as we mentioned, there can always be that idea, I wonder if you brought this on yourself. Were you flashing cash around before you headed down the road? Where some of those thieves and covetous people saw that you were loaded and that you were just ripe to be knocked off. And so because of your behavior, you brought this on yourself, and I am not going to feel sorry for you. Because you just showed out. You were trying to brag. You tried to think you were something special. And now you got what you deserve. And I'm busy. I've got places to go and things to do. These kinds of mental conversations take place all too often with us. As we see opportunities to do good, as we see what the commands of the Lord are, and we understand that there is a course of action that we need to follow. But rather than following that course of action, we just talk about it. Or we rationalize it away. We come up with all the reasons of why it's not for me. I'm not the one who needs to do this. And we try to find a way to kind of salve our own conscience so that, like the priest and the Levite, we can walk down the other side of the road and not feel bad about our decision. But there were some things that this Samaritan realized whenever he saw the situation with this man. He realized that this man needed help. And truly, in application to us in our day and time, we all need the help of God. It doesn't make any difference how good we may see ourselves or how unrighteous we may see ourselves. None of us are perfect. And all of us need the care and the help of the Almighty God. And you see, God doesn't differentiate here and say, okay, I know that y'all need some rain, so I'm going to put rain in the premises of the righteous folk, and I'm just going to let all the unrighteous folk burn up. No. As Jesus said over in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 45, he says, that ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and he sendeth rain on the just and the unjust. We could go at length talking about all of the blessings that God has poured out upon us. All of the difficult situations that he has helped us to overcome. All the challenges in this life where we didn't have an answer. We didn't know what we needed to do. We couldn't see which direction was the right way to go. And God opened just the right door for the right opportunity at the right time. The telephone call came, offering us a job when we had no idea what we were going to do since we'd lost the last one. We didn't know what was going to happen with this diagnosis, and we were just all at wit's end about this. And then we got a call saying, false alarm, everything's good. Or we're going through the throes of maybe tremendous medical issues, and are we going to make it? Are they going to survive? Whatever. And God's still there. God's still God. And that medicine that didn't used to work now kicks in. And the things that look so bleak are not so bleak anymore, and recovery happens. God's good all the time. As Paul tells us over in Romans chapter 8 and verse 28, all things work together for good to them that love the Lord. All too often, we forget about that, as the God of this world kind of blinds us to just how good God is, what all he has done for us, and how supportive he's been. But all things work together for good to them that love God, and to them who are the called according to his purpose. If we keep on keeping on doing what we're supposed to do, it's all going to work out. You can imagine for a moment how the injured man felt along the road. I'm going to die. There's no one here to help me. I can't get up. Woe is me. My life is kind of flashing before me here. I guess I'll soon draw my last breath. But that Samaritan arrived at just the right time. We can't control God's timetable. We don't know what he's going to do and when he's going to do it and how he's going to do it. Whenever Lazarus died, word got to Jesus, but he tarried a couple of days before he went to Lazarus. Lazarus was died and already had been placed in the tomb. And of course his sisters were so distraught that, Martha was saying, if he'd have just been here, he wouldn't have died. Just take it to the tomb. Lazarus come forth, and he did. We don't know what all God has in store. Ours is to remain faithful and optimistic that God's going to do whatever is the right thing to do. And it may be an answer that we totally did not expect, but God's in control. But we've got to keep our eyes open to it. A lot of times, well, it's just bad, and it's only going to get worse, and nothing's going to happen good, and nothing's going to change, and it can't be anything. And we can just go down that road, and go down that road, and go down that road. Shutting our eyes to all the help that God sends, kind of like the story of the lady that was, the flood waters hit, and they climbed up on the roof. The waters were rising, and there was the call, God saved me, God saved me. So, and I just had faith, God's going to save me. Well, somebody came along in a canoe and said, come on, get in, I'll take you to the shore. No, God's going to save me. And then pretty soon, somebody came along in a boat, had a motor on it. Said, come on, we got plenty of room, get in, I'll take you to safety. No, God's going to save me, God's going to save me. Finally, they even rejected the helicopter that came over with the aerial rescue that would have pulled them out of there and taken them to safety. No, God's going to save me. Well, they drowned. When they faced God, they had a chip on their shoulder, saying, God, why didn't you save me? He said, what did you expect? I sent a canoe, I sent a boat, and I sent a helicopter. But because it wasn't the way the person expected it to be, it was all inappropriate. We have to watch our thinking sometimes, because there was something else that Samaritan realized. That could have been him. He was on that road. Maybe he was traveling alone as well for various reasons. And maybe there was a great fear in his heart, looking over his shoulder, wondering about what may happen. I hope I can make this trip safely. Galatians chapter 6 and verse 10. The Apostle Paul tells us, as we have therefore opportunity, let us do good unto all men, especially unto them who are of the household of faith. We find that our job is to be zealous of good works, as Paul told Titus in chapter 2. And we find that as we think about all those things that we could be doing, our plans sometimes just need to go on hold. Because after all, Christ gave himself for us, that he might redeem us from all iniquity, and purify unto himself a peculiar people, zealous of good works. It was the Samaritan that was the odd man out here. The priest and the Levite just kept on walking. They didn't see a need. They weren't going to be bothered. They weren't going to get involved. Samaritan realized it could have been him. The misfortunes that have befallen other people, maybe those misfortunes could have been ours as well. And by the grace of God, it's not been. And so I have opportunity. Let me see what I can do. Of course, you realize as well that this Jew is not recorded as ever having said anything. There wasn't here a plea for help. Please help me. Maybe he was too weakened to do that, and maybe the plea was there, we just don't have it recorded. But from what the Lord said, the man was in such a state, he couldn't even ask for help. And even maybe as he was strengthened a little bit, and they got him to the inn, and they got him bedded down, the Lord didn't say anything about that Jew looking at the Samaritan and saying, thank you for what you did. You know, sometimes we can just get indignant that people don't respect us enough for all the good stuff I do for other people. Where's all the thank yous? Where's the respect? And after all, I shouldn't have to, because they didn't ask me. They didn't say anything about what they needed or what I needed. There was no words, but I appreciate this. Oftentimes those go a long way. But you know, it's not about the behavior of others as to whether they're going to handle it well or not. It's our doing what we have the opportunity and the ability to do. Now here again, God doesn't expect us to go outside our realm of opportunity and responsibility because maybe it's beyond our abilities to help. God doesn't expect the impossible. But he does expect us to do what we can. without fanfare, without expectations, without expecting a trumpet to be blown and accolades laid upon. Over in Matthew chapter 6 and verse 1, Jesus said, "Take heed that you do not your alms before men to be seen of them. Otherwise you have no reward of your Father which is in heaven. Therefore, when thou doest thine alms, do not sound a trumpet before thee, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. But when thou doest alms, let not thy left hand know what thy right hand doeth, that thine alms may be in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret himself shall reward thee openly." The whole point is this. That Samaritan came upon a man who was of a different faith, who was a different nationality and background, probably a different socioeconomic status. And if the tables were reversed, the Jew might have walked by and left the Samaritan injured and lying in the road. But this man said, "I've got an opportunity, and I have the ability, which gives me the responsibility to do something to help this guy, whether he appreciates it, says a whole lot about it or not. And I'm going to do what I can do." You know, remember the story of Cain and Abel back in Genesis chapter 4 and verse 9, when God talked to Cain about what had happened to his brother Abel? Cain had killed him. And when God said something to him about it, he said, "Well, am I my brother's keeper?" The implied answer is, yes, you are. To do what you have the opportunity and the ability to do. Because you see, love acts. Whenever we have the kind of love for others that we need to have, not that we maybe know them on some first-name basis and have a whole history of good relationships with them, if we just love them as fellow creatures of God's creation, and I have the opportunity to do something, I need to be willing to do it. Now let's carry that one step further. How many times have we seen the commands that God's given to us? We know what we need to be doing in God's service, and we're still talking it to death. Oh, one of these days, I'll be baptized for the remission of my sins. One of these days, I'm going to start going to church again on a regular basis. And I plan to, and maybe when, and if this or if that. And we've been talking it for years. If that Samaritan had not been able to deal with that situation, that Jew would have died. We can keep talking, and we can keep talking. The Hebrew writer says one day we're going to die. And after that comes the judgment. How many good deeds have been left undone because we just talked them to death? We had good intentions. We were planning to get to it. But when the rubber met the road, we weren't there to do what we do. This morning, there's some steps you need to take to make your life right in the sight of God. If there's some way we can help you with that, it's not time to talk yourself out of it yet again. God loves you. He's asking you to act. Do you love Him enough to respond? We ask you to come. Let's together we stand. Amen.